Hello, and welcome to the Discorded Whovian podcast. Hello, and welcome to Classic Who. Yes, hello, my name is Matt, and I'm back as your host for tonight's edition. We are stepping back in time. You might have been joining us for either our midweek discussion, our first ever episode aired this week, and we couldn't be delighted that you've come onto this journey with Power of the Doctor. So I'm here to say welcome as we step back in time to Logopolis, the end of an era and the start of a new one. It was the end of the Tom Baker 7-year era, and be more delighted and proud that we're here tonight to discuss this. So first of all, we're going to bring our members from the Green Room. So join me live this evening to talk about the Fourth Doctor's farewell. What's his name? You know the name. Do you know he was on our last stream? It was a Shetland Whovian. Welcome, Aidan.
Hello again. It's good to be back.
Yes. And we got two newbies joining us this evening, Aidan, haven't we? We have one of your fellow friends. Oh, yes, we have one of your fellow friends and Whovians. What's the name? You know the name. It's Ace. Welcome, Ace.
Hello there. Hello there.
Welcome to joining us live on, well, I say live, well, recording-wise on here for Logopolis. It's a very pleasurable evening and memorable, and we can't thank you enough for joining.
It's a pleasure. Should be a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. And oh, absolutely. And finally, we're going to be introducing another new member to our podcasting service. Welcome this evening to Jessica. Hello, Jessica. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much, Matthew. I'm looking forward to Logopolis today. It's going to be a very interesting discussion.
Oh, absolutely. Can I just say before we start, absolutely, it's one of my all-time favorite episodes. It's honestly, I've loved Logopolis for many years. I would say of Classic Who, it is one of my most rewatched regeneration stories because not only does it have that rascal, what's his name, the Master. It was the end of that, as I've just mentioned, 7-year journey, and you basically have a massive crew for the end of the road. A brand new companion in Tegan Jovanka. You have Nyssa returning from the previous episode, who fans probably were at the time wanting her to be a new companion anyway, because they're boring keeper, which also featured the Master. Not Anthony Amy, some crispy, rotten-smelling type corpse person played by the wonderful Jeffrey Beavis. Please note, Jeffrey, this is a disclaimer. It's about the Master. It's not about you being a rotten corpse. You're a very nice gentleman, and
yeah, very much.
And
so.
Also, it was a story of Matthew Waterhouse and Tom Baker together, because he would continue on to the next series with his successor, who we out this evening. So we're going to start the floor this evening by the positives of Logopolis. For me, I'll round off, then I'll go to our members about positives. I have very good feelings about this story. I love the fact it's an introduction story for Tegan Jovanka, because we are introduced to her, as well as the magnificent Auntie Vanessa, who... I'm sorry. If you've never even watched Classic Who, this is going to be spoilers galore for you to see. Poor Auntie Vanessa, she ended up in as a little doll, which is what we reference on Power of the Doctor, because the Master had shrunk her with his unique device, the TCE. I'd say this, hiding in the shadows, wearing the dead face of like the person he kidnapped Remus from Keeper of Traken to taught him to forge alliance with the Doctor. This story is Thor's finest hour. He doesn't know if he's going to change. Like, it's that sense of danger, and you don't know about it when you keep seeing this mysterious figure called the Watcher, which Big Finish have expanded on through the Watcher's audio, which if you've listened to that, you will know where I'm coming from on that one. But if you have, I'm going to keep stumped until people have heard it. But all I can tell you with the Watchers is it's a brilliant prequel. It sets up Logopolis well. I think the TARDIS within the TARDIS dynamic was brilliant to watch. The music, the cloister bell, the Doctor contemplating changing the chameleon circuit after all these years. It's even Turner didn't revisit this until to reject Colin Baker. Yes, another Baker. But all in all, Logopolis is wonderful. The music is fantastic. And those final moments of Tom's Doctor letting go is probably one of my most favourite moments for a Doctor. He's happy. He's died. He's fallen from a massive tower, but he knows it's the end for that body, but it's not over for the journey. But as I say, I really love this story to pieces. But I'm going to pass over to Aidan now for his thoughts on Logopolis.
Yeah, well, I watched it for the first time like in a long while, and I still like really enjoyed it, like even after a few years of like not watching it. And like when you watch it again, like after a few years, like there are more things you kind of like realize and appreciate. Yeah, because I will say for me, like one of those things was actually the set design for a lot of places. So like the TARDIS interiors, like where like Thor and Adric start off in the TARDIS. Yeah, it's like that kind of like stone temple garden kind of place. I'm not also sure how to describe it, but it was like a really nice like environment. And also like seeing like the companions' rooms, like mainly just Romana's in the story. Like it's one of those things that I think in classic Who in general, it's like one of those things I wish New Who did a bit more, like just showing that the companions like have their own spaces. Yeah, because I think the audios do go into a bit more of it in, I think, if I'm correct, Relative Dimensions. And also,
yes, you are. Because...
yeah, just seeing all those, just like as I said, like makes me wish that New Who did a bit more of it. Like we see like the main room, but as far like from what I remember, that's like mostly about it these days. Like it's like excuse me, like. But yeah, like the story, like Logopolis does show like the TARDIS is definitely bigger on the inside. Like there are lots of rooms in the TARDIS, and also like the set design of like Logopolis itself, like the place, not the story, like the story in general. But Logopolis itself, like it's also like kind of like an interesting concept, like of like a whole city that's like powered like by maths equations, like. I mean, it makes me wish I actually did well at maths. Like looking back, yeah, I wasn't very good at it at school. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked now. But yeah, it was like it definitely was quite interesting to see. And then the Master disrupting that civilization, and that leads to like a chain of events that also includes like the death of Traken as a whole. Like in that story, like Nyssa does lose her home. Like like the last story, she lost her father. Like when the Master took over Trams's body, and proclaiming a new body at last. And
yeah,
then,
I completely agree.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and one more thing, like before I forget about it, it's like the fourth Doctor's like final scene, like where he like manages to stop the Master, like manages to just how to describe it? Like manages to like stop the Master, but is dangling, like just holding on and just hearing like all those faces in the past, like the Daleks, Storr, Davros, like one of the Zygons in the Black Guardian, being like, Doctor! And also, like the Black Guardian also saying, "You shall die for this," before he falls. And then he hears like all his previous companions like just saying "Doctor" before we get the final like honestly one of my favorite like last lines of any Doctor. It's the end, but the moment has been prepared for. Honestly, it's like just those final words, like honestly, I don't know how to describe it. It was just so good.
Exactly, Aidan. And if you were there, like in in the 1980s when it went out live, if you were Whovian, it must have been the shock seeing Tom literally plummet to his death. I mean, by today's society, if that scene was done today, Logopolis, you'd physically see like the Doctor falling down, like in the end of time. Now, I know it's budget at the time, but I would feel physically ill if I was playing that role like Tom Baker. Could you imagine the drop? And like I say, I don't know how he did it, but could you imagine the massive fall? And if you didn't know that was filming, being petrified of somebody going down to the floor.
Yeah, especially like since like Tom Baker at this point like been the Doctor for like 7 years, like still the longest Doctor on screen, like that was like continuously on screen, like so like just imagine like what people would have thought, like just like oh my god, like this is like truly the end of an era.
Yeah, because there were people like David Tennant and Matt Smith. There were people who actually physically left when Tom left because he'd done it for so long. He was the embodiment in America and everywhere. He was what, as I say, those two guys are now. He was virtually everyone's Doctor till now. In some ways, he still is. Yeah. He still is. America still knows who Tom is because he was the longest. But we will, as I say on that last note, Aidan, I will say, if I like try to interrupt, it's like when I really enjoy a story for somebody, I have to say, if I agree with it, that's the enthusiasm coming out. And I have to say, the points you also brought about Logopolis, that's the one thing I really wish New Who would do. We've heard about the swimming pool, we've heard about everything else, and we don't see the companions' bedrooms in New Who.
Yeah.
But we will come back to that a bit later, because right now it's on to Ace for your positive thoughts about Logopolis.
It should be interesting. Because this is one of my favorite regenerations of them all. It is actually one of my least favorites, but I still highly enjoy it for what it brings to the table for a regeneration. Merely of the concept of the Watcher, that was probably the best thing for me. Because it was kind of creepy in a weird way. Because it also led to the mystery of what it was for the whole episode. But I think that's also something I liked about its design as well, which is terrifying. When you really looked at it, it's terrifying design of just this pale white figure standing still, staring at you. Kind of like something like a horror movie when you really think about it. And I think that's something that New Who does, kind of messes charm, the old school designs and stuff, and all that stuff. And also some of the things Aidan said as well about the TARDIS interior and seeing more inside of it. That's something that Classic Who does massively better than New Who, is explore the inside of the TARDIS more. Show us the rooms, show us just the craziness that goes on in there. Like with the garden as well that we got. I enjoyed seeing that quite a lot, actually. That was lovely. Mostly just the set designs for me were just absolutely brilliant. Like the TARDIS inside the TARDIS joke was actually quite funny as well. I found that quite amusing for a while on that episode. Just seeing them freak out about why is there a TARDIS instead of a TARDIS, or a police box instead of the police box. What else? I thought Tegan's introduction was quite strong, actually, which is a good thing, because a companion should have a strong introduction. So yeah, and I quite enjoyed Tom's acting for most of it. He did definitely put a fair bit of effort in, which I liked. And some of the music score as well was great. The death scene was very good, in my opinion. Mainly when Tom actually passes. Fourth passes. And then the Watcher comes in close. I thought that was quite nice. Nicely done and all. but most of the points really you've both just touched on, which is the same as mine. So I can't really add too much onto it now, apart from that. Until we get to negatives, of course.
Oh no, of course. I'm so sorry about that. As well, Ace. For interrupting, can I just say, I will look back and say Auntie Vanessa's death is a very as we know, the family members now are such a huge part, and I think that was actually it. Classic Who. I think Tegan was really the first companion. If she isn't, I hope I've not misremembered. I think she was the first real one where you got a chance to see somebody with family members, and I think John Nathan Turner was the turning point where Classic Who became the new Who bridge, where you got family like Perry. We get to see a bit with like stepdad, like sorry, no, not stepdad, father-in-law, Howard, who she wasn't really fond of. You got Auntie Vanessa, who Tegan thought the world of, and her world was to show with the magic with like his brothers and his family on Alzarius. It's fascinating how a lot of foundations in the 80s became New Who's foundations, and the Master was really on point. I was terrified of Anthony Ainley in this story, a bit like Evil, where he's all menacing. I think if he continued the broad path like he started in Logopolis, I think personally people wouldn't keep calling him the Panther top comical master if he continued this route. But
yeah, that was a big thing for Logopolis.
Yes, like he was so menacing, and like how he hid in the shadows, like he was like that villain that you knew was coming. But when he was still impersonating Tremus, I was like, this is top writing. Like he's using Nissa's dead father to like try and manipulate her. But
yeah, that Master is really good in that episode at showing just how scary, manipulative he actually is, and mainly just how quick to death he is as well. Like just killing Tegan's aunt straight away. That was just brutal, but absolutely on point for what the Master should be.
Oh, absolutely. But as I say, thank you, Ace, for your positive thoughts, and as well as you, Aidan. So we're going to come next on to Jessica. So your positive thoughts on Logopolis.
Well, I thought it was an excellent regeneration episode for the Classic Who, actually. Well, obviously we had John Pertwee before this, but obviously we had to pass on through Tom Baker to Davies. I think that when we see the Doctor falling and his emotional regeneration into the Fifth Doctor, I definitely think that was one of the best, if not the most emotional, structured stories in Classic Who to this day. I would love to see more of the Watcher in modern day, and definitely talking about the TARDIS, definitely more rooms. I'd love to see it in the Ncuti Gatwa's maybe era, and maybe possibly if we see 14th Dave Tennant's era. Another thing, Anthony Ainley as the Master truly was perfect. Obviously after this episode, it was not really, he became more of a comical joke. But I think if he, like you said, if he kept on going, I think it would have been absolutely amazing. And I think, it was just, I mean, obviously we see Tom Baker leave the show due to set reasons, which we'll get to later. But I think for me, I really love the concept of TARDIS inside TARDIS, and especially with the communion circuit, and obviously that goofy tree he just steps out of in the episode. And absolutely, Tom Baker in Classic Who was one of my favorite Doctors, and it was probably sad to see him go. And that is probably pretty much it for positives.
Yes, and thank you, Free, thank you, Aidan, thank you, Ace, and thank you for your thoughts. So we're now about to 180. We're about to go into looking at the critical or negative views of Logopolis. And I don't really have much on Logopolis. I mean, I really wish, though, the Monitor, though, like the Logopolins had like a sequel, Big Finish, or a prequel in the classics or something. They knew the Doctor. They literally knew it. It would be nice if we could revisit them. They clearly had a huge history before Logopolis was destroyed. The only other negative I had is I love the crew of 3, but I kind of wished 2 episodes back or Keeper of Traken was a little bit earlier in the season, just so we could get like Adric and Nyssa a bit more before Tegan joined. That's it really, because for the end crew, it looked like it was the start of something wonderful for that quartet, but it was the end for them, and they carried on with Davison. But really, on the whole, of Logopolis, I think the only critique I really have negative-wise of it is not getting to know much about the Watchers, really, or the Logopolitans. It's that they clearly have a huge history, and if the Watcher is actually the Doctor, really, then why couldn't we, like, figure out, is this a certain type of regeneration where it's come to the point where the Doctor doesn't even know they can't change? This is like the handover, like when they think they're about to die and there's no point, which is interesting. Tom's Doctor doesn't even know what's next, so it would have been nice to have explored that, you know, like in Modern Who, where if they don't know if they can change lives because of the cycle issue or anything. It's fascinating that Tom was petrified at that point, like he didn't know what was coming next. Apart from that, I don't really have much negatives for Logopolis, but I'm sure somebody else might. So we're going back up to Aidan for your negative thoughts on Logopolis.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, aside from like the points you brought up, Matt, that then most of the negatives I have are mostly just like nitpicks. Like, I think the first one for me was like I might have missed something with it, but in part 2, like where they had to like, or Tom, like the Fourth Doctor and Adric had to like flood the TARDIS or something. And I was just thinking, like, that was the one thing that kind of confused me at first. Like, maybe there's something I'm missing here, but I didn't really see the point of that. Did that make sense? Like, I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like, if it's done for the joke.
Yeah,
like, where they're just like, wait a minute. And then they end up on a boat.
Yes, because they were trying to go under the water and then they ended up on the boat. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, like I don't really think they really needed to do that. Like, but it might be something I may be missing. And the only other real nitpick is probably with like Nyssa, like probably finding out like about like the Master like taking over like Trems's body. Because I'm not sure about this, but it's like it seems that she didn't she when she met like the Master again, like she didn't know like that she was speaking to the Master, like hijacking her father's body. So it makes you think, like, wait a minute, shouldn't she realize, like, wait a minute, he looks a bit young. Wait a minute, something's not right here. Like, and then like when she finds out, that kind of like feels like there's not really much of a reaction to that. If that makes sense, like I'm not sure that's just an issue with like Classics Who is like her running Classic Who as a whole, because I know like she did have more of a reaction like in like the War Master box set Killing Time when she saw the Master again, like just seeing the fear like of like the man who killed her father.
Yeah, I think Classic Who, I think that at that point, Aidan, just quickly on that one, on that note, is I think the biggest problem with Logopolis, I think it must have been in the script editing, they must have kept changing things around, because surely it might have been consistent with the earlier drafts where Nyssa has more, because Tom was going. I think they kept swapping pages around, because one minute she's terrified to know who Tremas is. Oh yeah, now I can actually say what I was thinking for the nitpick to go back. It was the fact the Doctor, when he saw Nyssa, he wasn't surprised. He's normally surprised at seeing companions who just popped out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, oh, Nyssa, what's the surprise? Like, that was totally unexpected.
Yeah, it's like he was expecting her on Logopolis, which was like, okay.
Yeah, he's just like, oh, hello, this is totally surprising. Oh, wait, I'm actually done with the show. Nah. I'm joking, but still. But yeah, apart from like those two, I don't really have many other like negatives to say, to be honest.
that's completely fair, Aiden. I mean, I think because Logopolis is so well regarded, like when you watch it, it's so fun for a 4-part. Sometimes it doesn't feel like one, but sometimes it's like sometimes it makes and sometimes it doesn't. It depends what frame of mind you're in. And I get both. I think the only time I find Logopolis drags is when you've seen it so many times. You're like, okay, now I've got to sit back and really watch this thing. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't remember it being this long.
Yeah.
But no, so well, if you've done with your portion of the segment, then thank you so much for it. It's time to move back down onto Ace for their portion of the negative thoughts on Logopolis.
Well, for me, it was the untouched potential on the Watchers, which annoyed me because they were very interesting when they came on, and it's just like they don't do anything for the majority of the whole episode until the very regeneration. It's just like, oh, that's a bit, oh well. I didn't need to see that really, because it's very lackluster. But yeah, and what else? As you said before as well, the episode does drag on a bit after your second watch. I will admit that, because it is about 3 hours, isn't it? I would think. About 3 hours
25
long.
minutes a piece, yeah.
Yeah. So it's about 3 hours long, which is
it's about an hour and a half, yeah.
Yeah, it was like an hour and 38 minutes,
for Tom Mera.
I remember.
And for Tom Mera as well, it's quite long still, because that's when their episodes were starting to get a bit smaller in length-size when they entered the Peter era. So yeah, not Peter era. But yeah. And again, for Aiden's point as well, and this is reaction to the Master was a bit okay. It's a bit weird. I mean, it's kind of obvious, isn't it? But still, I guess you do you. Even though he looks like a younger version of your father, you're not really questioning it. Even though the last time you saw him, he had like a big grey beard, but you're still not questioning it. You do you, it's fine. I won't question your existence. It is a bit silly when you keep rewatching and you're like, how is she not noticing that though? Either she's blind or something else, because Nissa's incredibly smart. But yet she can't see the age difference between her father and the Master's body.
Well, there'll be a theory on that. That is the lighting on Logopolis makes him look like he's got a grey beard, even though he's younger.
Yeah, but even then, though, like, he was old in the episode. Like, before he took the body, he was visibly old. You could see the movements in him, and he was old. It's a bit like Nissa would pick up on stuff like that if her father was a bit more movement active, a bit more, personality difference-wise. Because it was clear as day. But it's just a bit like, how could you not know that? Mainly Nissa too, if it was like, I don't know, more of like a normal companion, like, I don't know, just Tegan, for example, and maybe you could get away with that. But for Nissa, she's incredibly smart, so it's a bit like, come on. It's a bit silly rewatching that.
Oh, exactly.
And I don't know. I think the main thing for me though was just the Watchers just not being touched on enough, because they are a really cool concept, and it's just sad that it took so long to get anything to it. But apart from that, I don't really have anything else.
For people who wanted it, yeah, no, exactly, Ace, and for people who want an expansion on the Watchers, Big Finish has that audio Watchers written by Matthew Waterhouse, which is long. But it does go into like who they are and how that's set up for Logopolis is. I'd say that's an essential. To me, that felt like a deleted episode from that era, listening to that long length audio. But
it may as well have been, because when you listen to the audio and watch the episode, you're kind of like, oh, that makes a lot more sense than what the Watcher actually is. Yeah,
exactly. And that's why I love Watchers. I mean, because not only is it a surprise for people who've not seen the cover, the Daleks are in it. So you've got Adric meeting the Daleks right before Tom goes to regenerate. But again, that's a whole other podcast. And I'll thank you, Ace, now for your thoughts on the negative side of Logopolis. Thank you so much. So we are going back round to Jessica now for negative thoughts on Logopolis.
Okay, I do have a couple. So obviously, as Aiden pointed out, that the flooding of the TARDIS, I definitely think with Classic Who, and maybe a bit more of Modern Who nowadays. There's definitely a lot of filler content, especially with the 4-parters, and that's why it's so long. Especially with filler content, it kind of nitpicks for me because it's like it's not really necessary. They didn't really need to do it, but at the same point, it's like, well, if it makes sense for the story at the time, I guess so. The writer definitely at the time had issues, and obviously Tom Baker did leave due to the writing issues. And I think you can clearly see that because obviously, as Ace mentioned, like Nyssa should have been clearly be able to see the Master, because he was clearly young enough in that episode to be like, it is the Master, and it's obvious. And it just feels like the show is obviously getting to that point where it's slowly deteriorating, but it's not just started. It's sort of like a small match to the flame. Another thing I kind of noticed that I just thought, it is definitely goofy, but the tree that the chameleon circuit morphs into, it's such a tiny tree, and it's something that it's like, I don't really understand. Like a tree, it's like, okay, the blue box was perfect, and I understand like maybe they were trying to go for something new, and if something they tried a new, I think it would definitely receive a lot more negativity. It probably would. But another thing I definitely think Ace was onto was the Watchers. Absolutely, they did dive into it, Big Finish, but I feel like there was definitely a deleted episode there that definitely needed explaining, or they could have done like maybe an extra part, maybe going into like, oh, this is what the Watchers do, this is why they're here. And it's like, we could have had that, and they kind of chose not to explain it at the time. And I would love to see it explore in New Who. I think Davis probably might touch on that, but we would have to see. And really, apart from that, I think nothing really.
Thank you again so much, Jessica, for like your thoughts, as well again to you, Ace, and to Aidan. And can I just say before, because we're nearly coming to the point now, folks, where we're nearly at the end of this episode, I just want to say thank you so much for coming along with us on this journey. This is our first edition of Classic Who, and it's going to be the first of many more. So we are literally delighted that you've all come and watching us. Please remember to subscribe on YouTube, because we are here doing this. We're fans. We love the show. It's mad. It's bonkers. And do check it out. So what we're going to start doing next, however, is basically what would we change with the episode? And there have been some points already raised. So I'll go first. Basically, my sentiment's going to be echoed across everyone, I suspect. It's going to be the Watchers for me, because obviously we've had the Big Finish story, but it would have been amazing to have had like one extra episode or one other part, as it's been brought, as well as the Logopolitans, which I mentioned earlier, because the Monitor clearly had previous history with the Doctor, which hasn't been explored, which would be fantastic if Big Finish could do like a first Doctor story, or even go back to the other two incarnations, because we'd like to know who was the Monitor's Doctor before Tom came to Logopolis. It would have been really nice. But apart from that, yeah, that's really what I changed from the story. And earlier as well, I also mentioned about the crew from 4. If Tom held on one more episode, I would have really liked to have seen this crew have one more adventure with him. But yes, we're going to go up to Aidan for what thoughts would you change on the story if you were in charge of Logopolis?
Yeah, because I think the main things were already brought up already, which is mainly like going a bit more into detail about what the Watchers are, because like if someone was watching this like back in like 1981, that they'd be thinking like, wait, who are these people that look like they're just covered in paper mache? I'm just curious about like who, like what on earth they are, and they just like, oh, they just fused with the Doctor, and then he becomes this blonde guy. All right, yeah, it's like just like a bit more information. Like I would have probably given him a bit more info, like about the Watchers, and also like just about Logopolis, like just seeing like them talk about hold on, let me get my words straight here. Like, yeah, I think the other thing was like about Logopolis, as you said earlier, Matt, like just figuring out like what was like the first time that the Doctor like went to Logopolis. Like maybe they might do like a first Doctor or maybe second or third Doctor story, like where the Doctor goes to Logopolis for the first time. Yeah, because that would be cool. But apart from those two things,
it could also still be 4 because it could be with Leela, Sarah. It could even be earlier in his timeline.
Oh yeah, that was a good point. I didn't actually think of that. But yeah, apart from those things, I can't really think of much else.
Yes. So Ace, oh no, after 1 second. Thank you, Aidan, for your thoughts, and we'll go on to Ace now. I got a bit excited.
Oh,
what are your? Oh, what did you say? Sorry.
Oh, nothing. I was just saying, "Oh, joys."
Yeah. It's what we do to you in charge.
Probably remove the filler section and replace it with more information on the Watchers. In my personal opinion, like the part underwater and stuff, I got drags on a bit from there. I would change that to them trying to find out information on the Watchers, mainly for the viewer's sake, more than Adric's. I would change the writing around the Nissa scene, so that she actually realizes it's not her father. We could look at it less stupid. But apart from that, it's nothing really. Just those two major things for me.
Yes, and I will echo that sentiment about, as I say, for Nissa, who everyone adores now more thanks to Big Finish and the Davison era, I'd say a lot of 80s who kind of downplayed like the death of Adric, which we covered in Power of the Doctor, and 80s who also downplayed like the companions when they lost their families and such. It's like one episode and then you're expected to move on. It felt a bit heartless that there was no consistency. Now, I mean, the one funny thing is the Turlough's like last one. It's like, oh yeah, I'm from a planet called Triom. And it's like it had to take how many episodes before you found out where he was from. So it's fascinating me, like the family side in Classic Who was all right, but you could tell that was fixed much later on years with New Who, which I'm really glad people like Russell, Moffat, and Chibnall took more into the family side, and Big Finish is doing more of the family side now for the classic companions, which I'm happy with. So we're going. Yes, so we're going now to Jessica. What would you do if you were in charge of Logopolis?
Okay, if I was in charge of Logopolis, again, I think Ace is onto absolute banger there with changing the filler episode to maybe develop more about the Watchers. I'd love to know where they, obviously, how they know the Doctor for so long. We could do maybe Tom Baker. We could do Pertwee. We could even do a future incarnation because obviously they didn't consider that at the time. And of course, with Big Finish, they can always, for example, Eccleston, they did the Vashta Narada and they did the past incarnation. So it's something that I would love to see maybe changing for the Logopolis is maybe changing that filler episode. Another thing is definitely getting Nissa to recognize the Master. She is absolutely way more smarter than she looks, and I think that she was kind of wasted in that episode with the Master not recognizing. But apart from that, I don't think she was wasted. I think she was just sort of more onto the slightly unknowledgeable side of things. And I think another thing I would definitely change is the tree. Please just don't have the tree. Anything but a tree. And I think, the tree was good. It just could have been a little bit more better. Obviously, the budget at the time was still pretty much BBC mainly. But yeah, I think I probably would have put a bit more effort and time into Logopolis. But I think Tom Baker's send-off was good. And I think we could have maybe had a longer episode, maybe with extra companion time. But I think obviously Tom Baker wanted to leave at the time, so it's like we can really wish for more. We've already had, and obviously at the time we've had with Tom Baker was absolutely amazing, and obviously he is still probably one of the best classic Who Doctors to have a long reign and obviously push on, and that's what I'd change.
Oh, fantastic! I have to say. Can I just say quickly to everyone, thank you so much for coming on this evening. We're about to start wrapping up shortly, but I just want to say thank you so much again, Aidan, Ace and Jess for being here. And personally, this has meant quite a lot because we're getting ready to ratings in just a second. But I want to just personally say as well, the sets are phenomenal for Classic Who on the limited budget. It was one of my favourite sets was Logopolis, as well as the Pharos project, that connectivity and the way that Classic Who on a limited budget would always find unique ideas weekly. And that's what I loved about it from Logopolis. The sets felt like grand scale for this final outing for Tom. And it did him justice. So I hope we do you justice. And here's our ratings before we say goodbye. So we're going to do this part differently. Aiden's going to be setting off and starting the ratings for Logopolis. What would you rate episode, Aiden?
Yeah, I'd say overall it would definitely get like an 8.5. Yeah, 8.5 out of 10 for me. Yeah, it's definitely like in my like top 3 regeneration stories at this point. Yeah, like with like not number 1, but it's like definitely I'd say like number 2 or 3. I'm kind of undecided between the like Logopolis and what the story probably either that Caves of Androzani, which yeah, like the number 1's still Night of the Doctor for me, like because like partial 8th Doctor bias, but yeah, like,
I was gonna say I wondered the reasons, but you already just said them.
Yeah, like, but as an 8.5 out of 10, it's still like a really good story, and it was like a really good send off for like Tom Baker, like a good send off for his 7 years of being the Doctor. And as he said, it was the end, but the moment had been prepared for.
And it appeared in the 50th, but that's a whole other story and a whole other podcast.
Yeah. Like revisiting a few faces.
Oh, yeah. It's a bit controversial on that, but we'll talk later.
Yes. Yes, we'll save that drama for another episode.
Yes. So we're going next to Jess. Your ratings on Logopolis.
Overall, fantastic regeneration story. I think it is probably in my top 5 of regeneration stories compared to Aiden's top 3. So, for example, I could probably rank it probably about 4, whereas probably 3 to 1 are probably more recent regenerations. Definitely, probably second was Jodie's regeneration for me because obviously nostalgia-wise. And overall, I think it's a solid like 7. I think 7 out of 10 is probably really good for the episode. You know, send off to Tom Baker. Anthony was really good. Nyssa introduction to Tegan, if I got that right. I might have got that wrong. But yeah, again, it was yeah, okay. And then it was yeah, absolutely. It was a really good episode. I think obviously there could be more with such as the Watchers and stuff. But again, we can't really boost for what until we get it. Of course, obviously we have the big finish and maybe potentially more stories that could dive into it, but who knows, you know.
Well, thank you so much, Jess, for your thank you so much for your ratings. So Ace, what was your rating score for Logopolis?
For me, it's probably an 8 out of 10, personally. That's like not reaching my top 5. It's probably my 6th place, honestly. So which is quite low for me. If anyone knows me, then my favourite one is always going to be The Brink of Death in the Big Finish catalogue of Colin Baker's regeneration. If anyone knows me, that's my top regeneration to exist, hands down. Nothing's beating that for me right now. But his is probably 6th.
Oh no, I'm just agreeing with you. Absolutely. That's a very top story written by Dalek Supreme and High Command himself, Nicholas Briggs, for that one.
Just, it gave me everything I needed from the 6th Doctor era that I didn't get, which was a send-off, a proper send-off.
Yes.
So,
from one Baker, yes, from one Baker to another.
Yes. So yes. That's probably my thoughts on it.
Oh, absolutely. And I can ask you again, thank you again for everyone. We are about to be wrapping up in a moment. I'm about to do the final rating, and the rating for me is it's a 9 out of 10 because it's one of my first regeneration stories of the Classic Who era. I grew up around Logopolis. I've watched Logopolis so many times. I probably remember the inconsistencies. I've seen Tom Baker tripping the Master over with his scarf is still one of the most comical moments. Tegan literally demanding to know who's in charge of this ship will always be as iconic. She is still iconic to this day through Big Finish, Pal the Doctor. Tegan will never change because Janet is amazing. Sarah Sutton, Matthew Waterhouse, and for those who haven't realised, with the police as well, they were quite good for police. I just like them being stunned, like when the TARDIS turned into an police box. Like, it's just some kind of trick, isn't it? But for me, that's why I love Logopolis. It's so goofy for a regeneration story, but it's a brilliant send-off story. But in the ranking of the other regenerations, it can be lower, it can be higher. It depends on your doctor. And we thank you for joining us for Logopolis. And please don't fall off at any telephone towers. Please do not let the Master corrupt you, and please remember that I'm Matt. I have been the host this week for the Discorded Whovian podcast. That is Aidan the Shetland Whovian. That is Ace, and you've been introduced to Jessica. Thank you so much for joining us. Back next week on Classic Who with the Twin Dilemma. We're stepping back to the beginning of Colin Baker as the Sixth Doctor. We'll also be covering this evening, for those coming on, the first trap from Torchwood, and we'll be doing the Marianne conspiracy next week. Stay tuned, and thank you again. We're about to do our farewells. So I'm Matt. As I say, I'm your host. Follow us on our social medias, which will be linked on this video. Would you like to say goodbye, Aidan, to the public?
Yes. Thank you all for watching. And before anyone forgets, don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Discorded Whovians YouTube channel. Totally not ripping up Peter Capaldi there. Oh, sorry.
There was an attempt.
I think I just got a message from the I think I just got a message from the BBC. I think we're about to be sued here.
Oh crap.
Ace, would you like to say farewell to the public?
Farewell, and don't run into a wall.
Good advice.
Good advice. Good advice.
Wise words. Wise words. Jess, would you like to say your final word?
Okay, yeah. Like I said, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for listening in, and don't turn into a tree or flood your home. Please don't do that.
Thank you again so much, everyone, for joining for Logopolis. And until next time, bye-bye. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.